If you've ever sat in a conversation and felt like you didn't belong, if you've looked around and wondered why people go to such lengths just to fit in, or if social interactions sometimes feel like an exhausting, meaningless game, then this video is for you. And if you've never felt this way, maybe it's time to ask yourself if you've been living a lie. Because today, we're diving into an uncomfortable truth. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, saw through this illusion with striking clarity. Most people go through life trapped in a performance. They dress, talk, and act the way they think they're supposed to, not because it's who they truly are, but because they've been conditioned to crave acceptance. But here's the question no one seems to ask. Acceptance from whom? Think about it. How many times have you forced yourself through empty conversations just to avoid seeming rude? How often have you laughed at a joke that wasn't even funny? How many social interactions have felt like a transaction where you're expected to trade a piece of yourself just to fit in? And now, the real question, what is the price of this? Schopenhauer put it plainly, intelligence and social life don't mix easily. The smarter you are, the harder it is to ignore the illusion, not because you think you're better than others, but because you notice what they don't. You see the masks, you recognize the lies hidden behind polite smiles, you understand the fragility of a world where people are desperate for validation, clinging to approval like it's the only thing keeping them afloat. But the most unsettling truth you realize? Most people choose to ignore it. Society isn't built to make you think. It's built to keep you entertained, distracted. Because the moment you start thinking too much, you begin to see the cracks. You notice how most relationships are surface level, how most conversations are just background noise, and how the desperate struggle to fit in is really just self-betrayal. And here's the real dilemma. If you're sharp enough to see this, then you're also cursed with the loneliness that comes with it. Because let's be honest, the more you think, the more you stand apart. And people sense it. They notice that you don't get caught up in the collective hysteria. They see that you don't engage in social rituals with the same blind enthusiasm. And that unsettles them, because your very existence challenges the illusion they cling to. Schopenhauer didn't sugarcoat it. Solitude is the price of a great mind. And yes, that truth stings. It hurts, because society has conditioned you to believe that happiness comes from connection, that you need friends, a social circle, a sense of belonging. But what happens when most of those connections feel hollow? What happens when you realize that the cost of fitting in is settling for mediocrity? You start searching for something deeper. You begin to withdraw. You stop chasing approval and start valuing your time more than validation. And here's where something unexpected happens. At first, solitude feels like a punishment, but then it transforms into a privilege, because in solitude, you uncover something society desperately tries to keep from you: peace of mind. Schopenhauer understood this better than most. For him, intelligence wasn't just an advantage, it was also a burden. The more you understand the world, the less it excites you. The more you see human nature for what it truly is, the less you want to play along. And this is where many people misunderstand. They assume this message is about hating society, about rejecting people altogether. But it's not. This isn't about misanthropy, it's about freedom. It's about knowing the difference between genuine interaction and forced obligation. It's about realizing you don't have to socialize just because it's expected of you. It's about understanding that true intelligence doesn't crave approval. And here's where things get interesting. When you stop seeking validation, something shifts. People notice. They sense that you're not desperate to fit in, that their opinions don't define you, that your life doesn't revolve around being included, and that unsettles them. Because most people are trapped, constantly chasing attention, approval, and relevance. But you, by refusing to play that game, you become a mystery. A mystery that intimidates, a mystery that intrigues. Because the irony of it all is this: the less you seek social validation, the more power you have over it. True freedom begins the moment you stop caring about what others think of you. So the next time someone tells you to be more social, to try harder to fit in, to be like everyone else, remember this: it's not you who's wrong, you're just someone who sees the truth. And for most people, the truth is too uncomfortable to accept. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. When you stop needing social validation, when you fully understand that most interactions are just an act, you begin to notice something else: the silence. And suddenly, silence becomes your ally. And that terrifies people, because we live in a world of constant noise. Social media, meaningless small talk, news designed to provoke reactions. Everything is engineered to keep your mind distracted and occupied. Because silence forces you to do something dangerous. It forces you to think. And thinking, that's a threat to the system. Schopenhauer didn't just understand this, he lived it. He spent most of his life away from society, immersed in philosophy, music, and deep contemplation. Not because he hated people, but because he realized something profound. The noise of the world only exists to cloud your mind. And this is where most people go wrong. They mistake solitude for isolation. But the truth is, there's a huge difference. Being alone is an act of power. It means choosing depth over superficiality, quality over quantity. Isolation, on the other hand, is a curse. It's what happens when someone desperately wants to fit in, but never truly belongs. When they crave acceptance, but never receive it. And here's the paradox. The one who chases acceptance will always be rejected, but the one who rejects it by choice, that person will never truly be alone. Because when you walk your own path without seeking approval, something interesting happens. You start attracting people who actually matter. People who think, people who question, people who don't need to fill every second of their lives with meaningless noise. Because here's the real truth, intelligence isn't antisocial. It's just that intelligence rejects the banal. Think about it, the greatest minds in history weren't against socializing, but they also weren't willing to waste their time on empty conversations. Da Vinci spent years obsessively immersed in his work, never feeling the need to share every passing thought with the world. Nietzsche withdrew from society when he realized his ideas were too unsettling for conventional minds. Tesla worked on his inventions with an obsession few could understand. And just like him, many of history's greatest minds were seen as eccentric, as strange, as difficult to deal with. Why? Because they didn't conform to the norm, because they refused to follow the script of ordinary social life. And here's the secret. Social life is just a series of predictable routines designed to keep you within the system. From the moment you're born, you're taught that being accepted is everything, but no one tells you the truth. No one tells you that most groups exist not because of real connection, but because people fear being alone. No one tells you that even those with large social circles often feel empty. No one tells you that the greatest ideas, the most groundbreaking revolutions, and the most important discoveries were born in minds that dared to step away from the noise. But here's where many get it wrong. They think the solution is to reject society entirely, to become a hermit, disconnect from the world, and live in total isolation. But that's not the answer. Because true power isn't in running away from the world. It's in knowing when to engage with it and when to step back. True power is moving in the shadows when the noise becomes overwhelming, but stepping into the light with force when the moment demands it. Schopenhauer said that superior intelligence is destined for solitude, but not as a punishment, rather as an advantage, because in solitude you can finally build something worthwhile. But here's the brutal truth. If your existence depends on the reaction of others, then you've never really lived. You're just a reflection of what others expect you to be, and that's the opposite of freedom. Because true freedom isn't about doing whatever you want without consequences. It's about not needing anyone's approval to do what truly matters to you. It's about not depending on noise to feel alive. Schopenhauer knew this better than anyone. That's why he distanced himself from the world, not out of rejection, but as a strategy. Because only from a distance can you see reality clearly. Only in silence can you hear your own voice. Now, here's the real question. Do you have the courage to accept it? Because once you do, there's no turning back. Suddenly, trivial conversations feel absurd. The need to fit in vanishes, and all that remains is the truth. The truth that solitude isn't a punishment, it's a privilege. And here's the most brutal paradox of all. The more you dare to be yourself, the more magnetic you become. Because people are starving for authenticity, but very few have the courage to be authentic. And those who do, those who move without fear, who don't chase approval, they're the ones who end up being followed. Not because they seek it, but because true freedom is so rare, so powerful, that it's impossible to ignore. And now I ask you, what will you do with this knowledge? You can ignore it, you can pretend this video never existed, go back to your normal life, keep playing the game, keep forcing yourself into a mold that was never yours. So tell me, what kind of person are you? If you've made it this far, I want you to leave a comment with the phrase, "Silence is power," because those who understand this are the ones ready to play the game of life by their own rules. And if this video made you think, if at any point you felt I was describing something you've always felt but never expressed, then subscribe, because this is just the beginning. See you in the next video.